I have found it incredibly rewarding to just let go of the excuses I had for not helping people, which is not to judge anyone who is not doing this, right? Because it's counterintuitive. It's in some ways countercultural. Our culture says that, like, people should be able to take care of themselves and we should be independent. And, I think it's just been incredibly rewarding to get to know people and to help them and to realize that, I don't know, it's not their fault. People ended up where they are through no fault of their own. And to see that has just, I think, opened up a new world of like empathy for me. And the other big lesson I've taken from all of this is like, teaching is teaching, training is training. It doesn't matter if your student is human or dog, the principles are the same. And it's always good to extend our human students the same grace we extend our dog students, right? So if a dog isn't getting it, I'm not angry at them for not working hard enough. And so if my human student isn't getting it, I'm not angry at them for not working hard enough either. I'm wondering, like, what about this, what about these ABCs is difficult for them? How can I set it up? Oh, maybe they need a little more motivation. They need to see some fast results with their dog to keep them going and to reinforce their own, training journey.
There's climber. Everybody. So I'm Lianne Shinton from Automation Dogs. Welcome to my podcast. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Chelsea Walsh. Hi, Chelsea.
Hello.
And Chelsea owns and founded Rocket and Rover, a dog training company. And I want to learn about you and Rocket and Rover, but I think we're going to have to also do another podcast because today I really want to focus on something that I did not know about and you introduced me to the other day, and that is co-sheltering and the concept of when people fall on hard times, they end up in maybe a disaster or homeless, and you're helping so that they can keep their pet with them. So I want to talk about that. But first, tell me a little bit about you and your journey and Rocket and Rover.
Sure. Yeah. So I used to be a middle school science teacher, and I'm on a break from teaching middle school science because it's super stressful, but I love teaching. And after COVID, I got a puppy, and he's wonderful and he's amazing, but he ended up having some resource guarding. He's got a lot of big feelings about people touching him and handling. And so I had to learn a lot to learn how to help him navigate the human world, because all of his behaviors supernatural for a dog, but don't work great when he has to live with people. So in having him and learning to live with him, I learned so much, and I realized, oh my gosh, I just love doing dog training. And I love the science of it. I love the animal side of it, of course. And so I really wanted to do more of that. And so first I started interning with this organization locally called CARE, Kitsap Animal Rescue and Education. And they offer a dog trainer internship. And so I started interning with them, and I learned a lot from them, but I'm also not always good at waiting. And I decided to get my certification through the Karen Pryor Academy. 6-month program. I'm so glad I did. I learned so much. And so that's kind of how I ended up being a dog trainer, is I get to take what I love about teaching and what I love about science and combine it with working with animals. And so it's the best of all the worlds.
I gotta say, you just explained the story of your dog with the resource guarding and how he has to navigate in the human world. Like, you explained that better than any dog trainer ever. And so your way of communicating to people is profound. I can get that from you already. Obviously, you teach kids. So
Yeah.
that's, a strong suit of
Being a
yours.
being a middle school teacher, I credit with so many of the skills I have now that I use as a dog trainer. So there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, teaching people is something that sometimes us dog trainers are not good at, and we have to learn. But you already got that part, and
Yeah, I feel very lucky.
yeah, so you're going to be much better at helping folks than dog trainers that are like, I'm just obsessed with dogs, because training people is such an important part of it, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a comment from a client recently. She's like, she had said something and I just went right into an analogy explaining something. She's like, you're just really good at explaining. And I was like, yeah, I can't turn it off. After 8 years of teaching middle school, I just got so used to having to take a complicated scientific topic and then put it in a simplified term, but that didn't lose accuracy,
Yeah,
which is definitely a skill that requires building.
and I like the word analogy too. I think that a lot of our clients can learn from some good analogies. Maybe the story part of it helps it stick or helps them to listen because it's not boring.
Yes. And that's another middle school thing. You can't make it boring. They don't necessarily even want to be there. At least one thing I love about dog training, they all want to be there. They chose it. They sought me out. Middle school students are often seeking to leave. So the skills of, you know, learning to make it interesting to get people who maybe otherwise don't want to be there. Here's my Zoom call cat.
Aw, he knew that he was being called out for a meeting. That's cute. What's his name?
Yeah. Her name's Climby. She's my
Ivy?
son's cat. He named her Climby because she liked to climb on things when she was a kid.
That is
You going to be
cute.
in the way?
Hi, Climby. So, Chelsea, you introduced me to a word called co-sheltering. And can you share a little bit about what that is and, a little bit about the homeless needing the pets and how there
Mm-hmm.
is a space for that?
Yeah, so co-sheltering just describes a shelter that welcomes both people and their pets. So a lot of times when I say I work with pets at a shelter, people assume it's an animal shelter. But it's actually a brand new homeless shelter that opened up in my hometown, the first one in the county that lets people bring their pets with them. And the reason for that is that animals not being allowed into shelters is a huge barrier for people seeking housing. I looked it up, and there's a study of people with pets who are experiencing homelessness, and 93% of men and 96% of women said housing wouldn't be acceptable if their pets were not allowed. So a lot of people who are homeless with pets are not going to be willing to give up their pet for housing. Sometimes communities have great resources for fostering, like our Humane Society offers temporary fostering, but it doesn't always work for every people, and not everyone's even willing to give their animal up to a foster. There's a lot of mistrust of systems because people have been repeatedly let down by our systems, and so they don't always trust that they'll get their animal back.
Wow.
And so a lot of people will not enter a shelter if they cannot bring their pet with them. It's an especially big problem in domestic violence cases. Many, mostly women will stay in an abusive situation because of their pet, because they are afraid of what will happen to their pet if they have to leave them behind. Because often domestic violence can be just as traumatic for the pets as it is for the humans in the situation. And so it's a huge problem, and our particular county is pushing towards lowering barriers to shelter. And so one of those barriers is people not being able to bring those pets. So our shelter is a emergency short-term congregate shelter, which basically means it's intended for people to be there 90 days or less. They can get an extension. Congregate means that there aren't individual rooms. There's just beds in big rooms. And so often there's, 10 to 20 to 30 people in a room. And they have beds separated by about 3-foot high curtains. So, in this particular shelter, we can take up to about 20 pets in the shelter. And we'll take cats, dogs, rabbits, and ferrets. We've only had cats and dogs so far, no rabbits or ferrets, but we've had quite a few cats and dogs, all sizes, ages, come into the shelter with their people.
So how did you find out about this, and how did you get led to this?
Sure. So when I first applied to be a volunteer intern at CARE, to be a training intern, they also told me about this new project they were working on with the county. And at that point, CARE was part of an advisory board helping to advise the county on how to even set this up ahead of time. So planning it, what kind of facilities would be needed, what kind of infrastructure, what support systems would be needed. And so it was just a super exciting opportunity to me to be able to finally feel like I could do something concrete about this problem that was a growing issue, but I felt so powerless to do anything about. And so this was my chance to actually be able to do something about it. And so I am doing this as part of CARE. And so CARE itself, at this shelter, we run the pet center. And so we have a little room inside the shelter. We have a grooming sink in there. And then we have a grooming table. And we also have storage for things like pet food, cat litter, crates, dog beds, toys, dog sweaters, all the things people might need and not have for their pets. And so our job is basically to remove that barrier to people finding their next step in housing by taking away that worry of how are they going to feed their dog? How are they going to do XYZ with their dog? We take that little burden off their shoulders and help them take care of their pet. So we provide them with the resources they need to kind of have that be one less thing they're worrying about as they're trying to find more permanent housing.
Wow. Now, for me as a dog trainer, I'm thinking about mass chaos, bringing 20 pets in with just regular people, handlers, not other trainers.
Mm-hmm.
So are there crates involved and rules? Like, how do you structure things so that everybody's safe?
Sure, and that right there is the biggest and really the most understandable barrier to there being more shelters, is that sort of worries about what's going to happen. What if there's a dog fight? What if this? What if that? Right? Because it's just a big unknown, and many of the people who run a homeless shelter aren't necessarily pet people. They aren't dog behaviorists. They're not trainers. They're not veterinarians. And so some of the rules we have in place is, one, before any pet comes in, especially a dog, we do a quick behavior screening. And that's mostly to just try and catch dogs who are super reactive, who are not going to be able to be comfortable being surrounded by strange people and strange dogs. And that's the biggest thing we look for, is just like a dog who's just not going to be able to be off high alert while they're in the shelter. And I would say that maybe 90% of the dogs at least pass that screening. And when you think about it, it makes sense. When you're homeless and you're moving around and you're staying, in a homeless encampment, a dog needs to be somewhat comfortable being around strangers and in all sorts of different situations. And often, actually, the hardest thing the dogs have to deal with is when they end up needing to be away from their person, because they're so used to being with them all the time that now, when maybe we have some bigger kennels that people can leave their dogs in when they need to go to a doctor appointment, or maybe they need to go for a job interview. And that can be really hard on the dogs who haven't been separated from their people in years. And so, but that said, so we do the screening, and then each person has at their bed a dog crate or a cat crate. The cat crates have multiple levels, so the cats have a little bit more room. And then if the person isn't, supervising them, maybe they're still in the building, but they've gone to dinner or something, the dog can stay in the crate. The dog can also sleep in the crate, or the dog can sleep tethered to their bed. But we actually haven't had any major incidents between dogs. Most of the dogs end up getting along fine. This is their new friend. More of a problem is this, they just want to go play with each other. And that's something that we really limit just because it's so easy for play to get out of control, especially in dogs in a stressful situation. But we have some of the just most lovely dogs, sweetest dogs ever, that you can't help but love them. So we actually, we don't have dogs barking all the time. We have dogs barking sometimes. They're still dogs, but they're not barking all the time. They're not running loose. You really haven't, and we even had the comment from the staff. They're like, I really thought that this would be worse,
Yeah.
But they're always surprised at how it really, the dogs are with their people and the dogs are used to being around people, and it really just doesn't, you don't end up having the problems that people worry about with just a little bit of structure and planning ahead of time.
So, yeah, I think I was overthinking it. It sounds like happy problems where the dogs just want to play, and you just have to have
we overthought it a lot too.
Yeah. And animals are very therapeutic. I did a podcast with Leslie Horton, who she's a nurse for humans, dog trainer as well, and super knowledgeable about therapy dogs, service dogs. And we really dove into like how dogs and cats too. Sorry, Climber, I almost forgot about you there, but how therapeutic they can be. So I think that is very powerful what the shelter is doing there. And it sounds like something that would really help rather than hurt.
Yeah, it is. And I've heard many people tell me that they wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for their dog or their cat. That, they were ready to give up, but they knew they needed to take care of their dog. They needed to take care of their cat. So they couldn't get up. They had to keep going. They wouldn't have taken housing, but they wanted their dog to have shelter. They didn't do it for them. They didn't do it. They did it for their dog. And there's another program that I would definitely recommend looking into called the One Health model. And that leverages that connection. And it has human doctors and veterinarians coming to people on the same day at the same place. And so if people want to have their dog or cat seen by a vet, then they have to at least say hi to a human practitioner. And for many people, that'll be the first time that they've seen a doctor in years. But they really wanted their pet to be seen by the vet. So many people are much more willing to take good care of their animals than they are to take good care of themselves. And it's just an incredible way to build a bond with people too, because I know that if you think my dog is handsome, then you are a good person. If someone shows that they care about your animals, then that means they might care about you. So it's an incredible tool to leverage that human-animal bond to take care of not just the animals, but the people as well.
Yes. Very, very powerful, impactful stuff. I wonder how other trainers across the countries can get involved in something like this. You said it was through CARE that got kind of this rolling.
Right. Mine was through CARE, so that's just a local nonprofit that started out as animal rescue and fostering dogs and rehoming them. And then over the course of COVID, switched more towards dog training. They have a really great reactive rover program for reactive dogs. And then when the county came along and asked him to be part of this is now a big part of their mission as well, is to reach out. Another big one is My Dog is My Home. a big nationwide organization that supports shelters who are trying to do co-sheltering, providing logistical support, information, training. Another big barrier is insurance. A lot of insurance carriers don't want to let you have certain breeds of dogs, right? No pit bulls, whatever that they might decide that is. No German shepherds, no terriers, the huge long list. We're lucky that in Washington state, if a facility receives state funding or is connected with like a city government, you can't actually impose breed restrictions. So government entities cannot impose breed restrictions in Washington state. At least that's my understanding of how it works. So because they're funded by the county, they couldn't put any restrictions on the breeds that came in. And I would say that, it's just further support for why those sort of breed-specific laws don't make any sense. Because we've got this dog, he's some kind of pitty mix, and he's just a little chubby white marshmallow of a, 70-pound dog who loves everyone and is super friendly and wouldn't hurt a flea. And then, occasionally you get a little dog in there who's, got things to say and does it far more posture. So, trainers, I think a big thing we can do is, one, look for those organizations who are already working with these populations, and then just advocate for co-sheltering with your local government, with your local shelters. Be willing to provide that expertise and support, because if a shelter is considering it, it can be really scary. And so if you're saying, no, we can make this work, here's organizations that can do it, here's how we can do these behavior screenings to kind of like lower the chances of behavior related problems, you can go a long ways to sort of paving the way for this kind of work.
So maybe talk a little bit about the behavior screenings, what that looks like. I assume that the owner of the pet is there. Do they fill out some paperwork?
Mm-hmm.
Do you meet with them? Do you have them do any kind of interactions?
Sure, yeah. So we meet with the person and the dog, and usually this happens at the same time. We also facilitate making sure all dogs are vaccinated and all dogs are taking flea medications, flea prevention. And so usually before they come in, we meet with them. And usually at this appointment where they're getting vaccinations, we also meet the dog and do the behavior screening. And a lot of these times are at the like low cost vaccination clinics that you see at like a Tractor Supply or other kind of feed store. And one advantage to that is that there's lots of other people and dogs around. So you have a great opportunity to see how the dog responds when they're around a lot of people they don't know, when they're around dogs they don't know, and in a, moderately stressful situation. And so a lot of it is observing the dog, seeing how big is the bubble, how close can another dog get before the dog starts to show a reaction. How do they feel about us coming up to them? So usually part of it is, does the dog let us pet them? Does the dog accept a treat from us? Now that we've given them a treat, now will the dog let us pet them, So that is a large part of that behavior screening, is just observing behavior. We've got a checklist that we use to kind of make sure we check for things. And then we also do some screening for things like resource guarding. A dog that resource guards isn't necessarily going to be totally disqualified, but it's something that we want to know of ahead of time so we can be prepared to do some behavioral modification training to help the person address that. Or if the dog shows some signs of maybe separation anxiety or some mild reactivity towards other dogs, we kind of look for that so that we can start addressing it maybe even before they get into the shelter, so that when they do get in, they're prepared to be more successful.
It sounds like a job for a trainer to be doing these assessments too, so you don't have just layman going in and maybe putting too much pressure on the dog too quickly. Hi, Climber. Oh my goodness, he's cute. But yeah, it definitely seems like that role would be someone with experience who can just read the situation, and
Mhm.
reading the human's body language too. When they start to kind of get stressy, it's like, maybe there's something here that I need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I don't think you could have really anyone other than a trainer or maybe behaviorist doing it, because you really want someone who is savvy with dog behavior. Because one thing I've noticed as a trainer, and now that I've learned so much more, is that we as humans are very bad at interpreting dog behavior. A wagging tail doesn't necessarily mean a dog's happy. A panting dog isn't necessarily hot. So, a dog licking me doesn't necessarily mean that they want to kiss me. So having a person who's familiar with dog behavior is, I think, an absolute must to be involved with this. We also have a veterinarian who's very generous in volunteering her time to work with us. And she'll come in and usually tries to kind of see each pet at least once to kind of check on general health and make sure they're doing well. She does a lot of work providing just sort of phone call consultations for us. Someone comes to us, my dog's doing this, should I be worried? And we're not veterinarians, so we don't know if they should be worried. So then we call her or text her. And so that is, I would say, a huge need. So if any veterinarians hear about this, veterinary care, as you all know, is very expensive. And people who are experiencing homelessness, people who have housing instability, or have a real hard time providing vet care for their animals. And so that's another huge need out there, is for veterinarians who are willing to volunteer their time, even if it's just as simple as some vaccinations, some flea medication, a little bit of medication for an ear infection. A lot of times it's not big serious things that they need, but just a dog who's having a hard skin reaction and needs some topical ointment, or a person who just needs to be reassured that, like, there's nothing wrong with their dog. Their dog is
Yeah.
fine. So
Yeah, a lot of moving parts, and definitely the veterinary component is super critical. It made me think back to something you said initially, and that was, if I'm down on my luck and I have to move into a shelter and I can't bring my pet with me, I might not get that pet back. I wonder if there would be maybe not such a big move with so many moving parts, but just something small where a trainer could help, or pet sitter could help to make sure that the dog was taken care of, and then also return to the person.
yeah, so that is another huge need for this population, one that we did not anticipate, that actually has been sort of our biggest hurdle. And that's the need for both, like, sort of emergency short-term and longer-term fostering. So many people end up in this position because of medical needs, and because human healthcare is also so expensive. Many people end up homeless because they have some sort of health condition that used up all their resources. And so, for example, we have a person who is in the shelter who has ongoing kidney issues, in need of dialysis, in and out of the hospital. If he goes into the hospital overnight, who takes care of his dog? Right? So the first time he went in, the only reason he was willing to go in was because we said, no, we'll make sure your dog is taken care of. And so we have a partnership with a local kennel who's willing to kind of on short notice accept pets from the shelter, who gives us a discounted rate. And so that's one tool we make use of, is local boarders for short-term needs when it's just a few nights. We also always do our best to find fosters for longer-term needs. I end up fostering a mama kitty and her 2 kittens for a few months, because her person did not have stable housing. And so they needed a safe place for a mama kitty and 2 little tiny baby kittens. So we got those kittens when they're were just, I think, maybe 4 days old. And so then we had that mama kitty and those baby kittens, and it was a lot of fun. And I was super glad to be able to find them new families. because kittens have a lot of energy. So fostering is another huge need. We're always looking for people who are willing to take dogs on short notice or to take dogs for longer periods of time. And then sometimes we end up in a situation where we had one person who he was homeless and he had inherited his mother's dog. And so, he really wasn't in a place where he could take care of her, emotionally, financially, all of these things. But he also wasn't willing to just give her up yet. And so what we ended up doing is we placed that dog with a foster. And because it hadn't been his dog, because it had been his mom's dog, he realized that this was what was best for both of them, was the dog to go to new people who had the capacity to take care of her, especially she was an older dog with some more needs. And so in some cases, we do end up sort of permanently adopting out the dogs. But in most cases, it's a longer term foster. And then the dogs go back to their people when they're out of the hospital or when they find housing where they can have their pets with them.
Yeah, I think that could be something that dog trainer with a small facility, or even if you're able to do some boarding out of your home, could get involved in just like a short term. And it's you could say no to just random stray dogs the county wants to drop off because you don't know if they're going to infect your whole facility and home with kennel cough and whatnot. I mean, if the little dog is coming from someone's home, then it's the history there, so it's a little safer bringing that animal into your kennel or your home environment, where you of course want to keep that safe because your dogs and your clients' dogs are there too.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for trainers who have a facility, who do board and train, or even just to have a room in their house or space in their house to have an occasional other dog, especially because often these dogs would benefit from training. It takes a lot of time to give your dog training. And so being in the home of an experienced trainer and getting that bit of training, not surprising, a lot of these dogs are not great at walking on a loose leash. And so imagine if their dog goes off for foster because they're in the hospital and the dog comes back and they can walk on a loose leash and they're not dragging them around, So I think that is a great opportunity for trainers who do have that space or that flexibility in their life to help out. Especially because oftentimes these are really short term. It's not like foster to adopt, where often you have a much longer period that you have them. These can often be just a few days while they're in the emergency room, and then they get back stable, they're back out, and now you don't have the dog anymore.
And
it doesn't have to be a long.
Yeah. I think that would be great work that folks could get involved in fairly easily. Not as many moving parts as what CARE is doing with the homeless shelter directly. And are there any stories that you could share that you've witnessed that have been impactful, where someone was able to keep their pet through their journey?
Sure. Yeah. So I had a woman who came to me. She and her 4 kids were moving in, and I was just there for my shift working. And she came and she's like, "You guys do pet stuff?" And she hadn't, until she came in and saw all these animals, right, realized that she would be able to keep her dogs with her. And so she had given her dogs up to a rescue to have them adopted out, right? Which was heartbreaking for her. It was heartbreaking for her kids, but her kids were her priority and she needed to have them in shelter. So she gave up her dogs. And luckily, she came in and I was like, no problem. And from her description of the dogs, it didn't sound like they were likely to end up not passing that behavior evaluation. It was 2 little lapdog type dogs, and so she was able to get them before they had kind of been fully processed at the rescue. And so she was able to get them back and ended up keeping them. I actually ended up with her tortoise for a while because they don't do tortoises at the shelter. And so for a while I had her tortoise. it was her son's tortoise, and she really didn't want him to have to give, one more thing that they had to give up,
Yeah.
And so I ended up with a tortoise, and her two little dogs were the sweetest little dogs at the shelter. And and then she ended up finding housing, moving out, and taking her dogs with her. So that was a great one where, these kids got to keep their dogs. She got to keep her dogs. And that was another one. There's another one where there's a woman who, sort of multiple times she had the opportunity for long-term housing, but she just wasn't willing to give up her dogs. They'd been with her from thick and thin. They'd been with her when she had like a major head injury, and had been with her and helped her with the recovery from that. And so she just wasn't willing to give them up. And then she also finally found housing that let her keep both of her dogs, which is another hurdle, meant a lot of housing doesn't let people have more than one pet. And so she was very lucky to find housing for her and her two little dogs. So those are two great success stories. The little white pitty that I was talking about, I mean, I love him. I would steal him, but my dog wouldn't appreciate it. But yeah, it's been really, he's Marshmallow. He's also deaf, which just adds like another layer in there. And he's got all sorts of allergies. So he needs prescription food, and he's needed all this sort of vet care that otherwise they wouldn't have been able to provide for him. So we're able to help out with providing prescription food for him. He has to have the hydrolyzed protein, or he starts itching like crazy. Yeah, and then there's actually a surprising number of people with cats, and just seeing how much, people open up, and people, you can tell that they're like, oh, I finally am feeling safe for the first time in a long time, and so being able to have their pets, and not just being able to have their pets, but to have people there who our only job is to give their pets the best life we can, right? So it's not just food and litter. We also have toys, right? We also have treats, and so they get to like pamper their pets in the way they wish they could have, prior. And so I think that also, gives people a lot of feeling of success, right? Even if they're getting help to do it, they're still able to like take care of this animal, who means so much to them. And I think that helps people feel a greater sense of like self-efficacy and, optimism moving forward.
Excellent. Yeah, those are some wonderful stories, and I think very eye-opening, especially when you mentioned like medical problems, and that can really force people to fall on hard times financially. So, yeah, lots to think about, opportunities too for hopefully trainers out there and veterinarians, because this seems like a needed thing and also a helpful thing.
Yeah. So another thing we offer is free vaccine clinics. And so we partner with the local Salvation Army shelter, and we offer free vaccine clinics. We just finished our second one a little bit ago, where, we don't ask questions. If you show up with your animal, we'll vaccinate them, we'll do a health checkup, we'll give them flea medication. So, and I think our first one we saw 20 animals. The next one we saw 16 animals. And that's with 3 great volunteer vets, and then also vet techs. I think we had a total of 15 or so volunteers helping out with each one. They got vaccines, they got flea medication, they got checkups, they got their nails trimmed. We had food that people could take, or new leashes and harnesses that people could take. It's a really popular poop bags. Incredibly popular item that people really appreciate, is just, I think, being able to like have the dignity of like picking up their dog's poop, when they're out. So that's another thing that we've been working on. We're hoping to be able to offer eventually a mobile vet that can go out to homeless encampments and provide veterinary care. We're always looking for ways to grow it. And so we are very lucky to get a grant from the county to expand our services. But trainers can definitely look at providing fostering. Another thing that you can do is, this is my own personal soapbox, is consider offering some sliding scale training spots in your business. You have an amount you need to get paid to make ends meet for yourself and to make things work. But you can always consider offering, one pet a month kind of thing that you take in for someone who just can't afford training. So there are a lot of people out there with pets who have really big problems, but there's no way they can afford a trainer, right? And some of those people are just, that far from being homeless, or they're making choices between, paying this bill or getting food. And so that's another way that trainers can help in their community, is offer those sliding scale ones where when someone comes to you and they just can't afford you, consider, taking one person a month who, and the way I do it is it's just on my website, and I offer kind of like 3 tiers, and 1 tier is the regular normal amount I would charge anyway. And I also make note on that, sometimes people tip me, and those tips go towards helping to support the sliding scale option. And then people have the option of, I think it's a 30% discount or 60% discount off the regular price. And a surprisingly few number of people ask to do that. So I am not inundated by people who want to take advantage of that. And I don't require any documentation. I don't want to see your financial records. If you come to me and you say, all I can afford is 70% of your rate, then that's fine. That's what we'll do. And if I have a spot open for that month, for that, particular payment tier, then awesome. I'll schedule you and we'll do. And I've had people call with, a dog that's got a lot of reactivity, and they just want to be able to take their dog on a walk with their toddler. They just want to be able to get their dog exercised without it being, a nightmare. Or I have someone who I'm working with now who's got, they adopted an adolescent dog, a lot of energy, and they're a little bit older, and they just need help reining that in so that, their dog doesn't end up pulling them down and, breaking a hip or something. It's usually not people who are like, oh, I want my dog to, be a competitive agility dog or something.
Right.
They're just trying to make it so that they don't give up their dog,
Right. Yeah,
because they can't handle them.
I was looking at your website today, and I saw the sliding scale as one of the menu items. So if folks want to visit Chelsea's website, you can go to rocketandrover.com. Is that right? And check it out, because I clicked on it because I'm like, what does that mean? But it is kind of like a pro bono type offering. And, I think it's very powerful. It is like the free vaccination clinics and different things that you try to help people with, but you're putting it out there as part of, your business offering this. So I think that could really help, like, with community and getting the local folks to really understand that you're above and beyond you. And also, like, as a trainer, it's always good to get our hands on different situations and dogs too, and get practice.
Yeah.
As a new trainer, it's great to go out and just train all the veterinary dogs for free to get in with them. But this would be a great opportunity to just get in with the local community and put it out there. I would think it could be like PR worthy too, like contacting local media and letting the news know I'm doing this, just to support. I am always thinking to support you and your business, because it's very unique, and no one else is doing it.
And I think it's because it's scary, right? I think people really worry that, people are going to take advantage of them.
Yeah.
Right? Or people are going to ask for a discount who don't deserve it or don't need it. And I think you just let go of that fear. You structure it so that you're going to be okay no matter what, right? And then, so I don't offer more of those slots in a month than I can afford to offer. So, it's not like I can take unlimited people who can only pay me $20 a session. Right. But I can take one or two people, a month who can, and I can afford to do that where I am right now. And I feel really lucky that I can do that, because I know that the difference between where I am, and this is, I think, a big thing I learned looking at the shelter, is just luck, it's just, I was lucky to get the job I got, or I was lucky that I didn't end up with a major health issue, or I was lucky that my parents were savvy about finance and could prepare me to make good financial decisions. I've been so lucky in my life in so many ways that I feel like I should share some of that luck and allow other people to. And it's just been really rewarding. And I think it also has helped me. I think it can be easy to get kind of bitter, and so to just make that decision to be like, no, I'm going to just believe in the inherent goodness in people and, offer this. And if people, and there's, I think, a lot of shame in asking for help. And so if people are willing to overcome that to get their dog help, then I'm willing to help them, I think is the end sort of message I've learned.
Yeah, the excellent thoughts and advice. You've definitely tapped into something that's very unique. I've not heard of anyone offering this. Kudos for bringing this to the training world. Hopefully someone will, take your advice and start getting things going in some other states and cities on some level, things that you've kind of brought to our attention today. So yeah, great stuff, Chelsea.
Yeah. Give it a try, and, you can always stop offering it. Or in a month where you things aren't going well, you can say, oh, my slots are full, and I can't do that this month. So it's low risk, and I think can be really rewarding, especially because, a lot of people who end up needing this work I work with a decent number of seniors who, as they get older and a little bit less physically able, they can't handle the rowdiness of a teenage dog, or they can't handle their dog's new behavior problems that are cropping up. And so helping them keep this dog, who may be the only family they have left, is really rewarding, to really see people who just, love their dog like I love my dogs. So
yeah. Excellent. Well, Chelsea, thank you so much for sharing today. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'm going to look at the things I wrote down to kind of make sure. I think we covered most of them. And yeah, I would say that, I have found it incredibly rewarding to just let go of the excuses I had for not helping people, which is not to judge anyone who is not doing this, right? Because it's counterintuitive. It's in some ways countercultural. Our culture says that people should be able to take care of themselves and we should be independent. And, I think it's just been incredibly rewarding to get to know people and to help them and to realize that, I don't know, it's not their fault. People ended up where they are through no fault of their own. And so, and to see that has just, I think, opened up a new world of empathy for me. And the other big lesson I've taken from all of this is teaching is teaching, training is training. It doesn't matter if your student is human or dog, the principles are the same. And it's always good to extend our human students the same grace we extend our dog students, right? So if a dog isn't getting it, I'm not angry at them for not working hard enough. And so if my human student isn't getting it, I'm not angry at them for not working hard enough either. I'm wondering, like, what about this, what about these ABCs is difficult for them? How can I set it up? Oh, maybe they need a little more motivation. They need to see some fast results with their dog to keep them going and to reinforce their own, training journey.
I get what you're saying about just kind of letting go and trusting, to help dogs, help people. I see, dogs on the side of the road with a homeless person and I feel bad. If like maybe take the dog and help the dog. But I see so many of my own clients where I'm like, I want to take the dog and get the dog out of that family. And, maybe the dog is providing that person the therapy, the therapeutic, things that dogs can do for us and helping them to get up in the morning. And, there's veterans on the street and people that have had major injuries or illnesses. So there's just so much more to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, yeah, definitely good to be kind and help people.
Yeah, and I feel I end up a happier person because of it. I'm much happier thinking that, looking at the world through a lens of some people aren't getting the help they need than looking through the lens of some people are too lazy. So maybe self-serving, but I do think it gives me just less stress in my life to look at the world through that lens.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. Great advice, Chelsea. Was there anything else that you wanted to add? I know you have a list there that didn't want to miss anything.
No, I think we talked about it all. And thank you so much for the opportunity for me to kind of climb up on my soapbox and talk about this. I think a lot of people aren't helping just because they don't know that they can. And so I know I am really lucky to have learned about this opportunity to be involved in this. And, if I had made slightly different decisions, I might never have heard about it and never got involved. So I think there's a lot of power in just knowing that there's a way you can help and make a difference.
Yeah, yeah. Great stuff today. And I'm excited to have you on again. I think we need to talk about Rocket and Rover, and we need to talk about some of these ways that you explain dog behavior and dog training to the layperson, and analogies and stuff. So I want you to think of some really good analogies that really help people to learn so that we can do our second podcast and dive into all that good stuff.
Absolutely. My other favorite soapbox is education. So
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you, Chelsea. So if anybody wants to check out rocketandrover.com, is there any other places where folks can find you, socials that you'd like to share?
there's links to both Facebook and Instagram on the website, and that's probably but I think it would be, if you search for Rocket and Rover on either Facebook and Instagram, you'd find me there too.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing today, Chelsea. We'll see you again soon. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Stay on too at the end if you can. And yeah, thanks, everybody, for listening. And I'm Lianne Shinton from Automation Dogs. Thanks.
Thank you.